Thanks for checking out this highlight from the Casually Hardcore podcast. If you want to check out the full podcast after the show, please be sure to hit the top link in the description. But now, let's do it.
Because we're all having a different experience. We're all having a different life experience. We're all having a different game experience. And like that dead game thing, right? Somebody's at a different point in their journey. Like I know Rook's community is something that if I got to choose one community style for the whole of the internet, like there's a positivity there, even when there's bad news. And like how we can respond to our worst days in a way that doesn't have to make everybody else's day worse is something that A, I wish games had, B, I wish communities had, and C, I wish like all content creators, ourselves included, could always do. We don't. And so like how, you know, I don't really have a question there, I guess. I'm just going to toss those ideas out there and I can see Rook thinking. So that's question mark.
I'm always thinking. It's like thoughts are in my head at all times. No, yeah, yes. Every single thing you've both said. I mean, Brian in particular, like, I'm not the kind of person when it comes to community, right? Like, and positivity, it's never the kind of thing where you have to do what people are referring to as like toxic positivity, right? Willful blindness of things happening in the world that are bad or things that deserve critique. But when it comes down to it, I mean, you're right. The internet has this propensity because it's satisfying, right? It feels good when you're like, I'm upset about this. And then everybody's like, me too. And you're all just sitting there like yelling into the void, you know? But the problem is that if we don't keep balanced opinions on things, right? And that includes, like you were even both talking about earlier, playing various games, trying different things, talking to lots of different people, seeing different mentalities, play styles, information, article, whatever it is, right? We have to try as players to keep a balanced mindset because, like you said, Brian, what we ourselves feel is very much, it's a personal thing. But there's much more outside of that we can actually critically break down, discuss, look at, and that won't like make an entire space a cesspit that nobody wants to be in. And that's the big thing. And 14 really overall has a great community, but we keep that going by being a great community and encouraging other people to get into that same mindset, right? When it comes to things like tossing out this is a dead game because one piece of content got delayed. It's like, are there valid things to break down and why this happened and why people are upset? Yes. But can we label, because of our own personal feelings, this entire thing as a failure? No. And it's a disservice. It's a disservice to the game, the community, to new players that are interested in the game, that could help the game continue and come out with more things that we want. Yes. So before you jump to like those statements that are tearing things down constantly, before you make that a pattern that you are reinforcing everywhere, in streams, on Discord, on Reddit, in your guilds, in your FC, in your, like, just try to combat it. Try to do the opposite, you know? Something comes out, break it down, don't be afraid to talk about it. But encourage people, lift each other up, celebrate the good, always try to find pros to your cons. Like, it's that balance, right? And we see in 14 that even a lot of times just saying hi at the start of a dungeon changes the entire experience versus going into a dungeon in World of Warcraft or other MMOs where I've had experiences.
I mean, there's aspects of WoW that are really positive. There
Yes.
are. And like when you get into a good guild, WoW has an amount of group content. It has an amount of group-driven PvE content that allows for large parties, small parties, incredible difficulty where you can have these major triumphs. You can form relationships where I have been to weddings for people who I wasn't entirely sure what some of the other people that were going to be there to look like, because there was a section of the wedding where it was us guildies. I have been there. I've been to destination weddings, gotten on a plane to go to weddings, to meet people that I have known for 10 years. WoW built that in a way that 14 never has for me. That is unique to that level of adversity where coming together forms that bond. But that is because that level of grouping up is required, because when you're just out in the general space, when you're in the grocery store, in the mall of World of Warcraft, there is no police force, there is no moderation. And so somebody can just walk up to you and just push you down for no reason. And they do. Like there is no, and so there is like, if you can, you just imagine the chaos if you just went to the grocery store and somebody could just walk up and just flip your cart, and like the grocery store didn't say anything, the police didn't say anything, and you're going up to the register, you're like, okay, I'm going home, it's been a long day. Somebody just walks and just flips the whole thing and then laughs at you and just walks off. Like, it's insanity. We have to live in a society where things function, where like people can just not have their life ruined for somebody else's half-second LOL. And sometimes WoW doesn't do that, and that's where that negativity comes from. So I think it's, you're pro and you're con there, and so that kind of shifts it to within content creation, within the part that the three of us have a modicum of control over. We can't control how devs police their communities. We can just comment on it, and we're honestly just members of the community like everybody else. Brian and I, everybody's like, well, you guys got streamer privilege to go to FanFest last time. No, we both had browsers open and refreshed frantically and hoped to God we'd make it, just like everybody else. Maybe in the future, if there's ever a fan fest in person again, we'll get invited and we can be excited. But I can tell you, as of now, just players. And we don't have any control over their TOS and all of that. Like, but in your own community, you do have that control. Twitch lends that control. So how do you, when the pavement hits the road, how do you put in, I mean, I guess the term is policies. Like, how do you make decisions that kind of guide that? And how much of that is your responsibility?
I think it is our responsibility as content creators. And this is something that people have a lot of different opinions on, right? Am I just a person who's playing games and nothing beyond that effect? Like if my community chat, or if, people are spewing hateful stuff, that's not my fault. I'm just doing my thing. I'm playing games, right? But when it comes down to it, I believe that content creators are facilitators for spaces within the gaming community, whatever form that takes. And like you were saying, it's never a case, I think, particularly of being like, I don't know, the special chosen players that for no reason other than being in front of a camera get to, do these things. It's not that. For me, I look at it more as content creators being a bridge in the process, right? Connecting players and connecting those more like inaccessible parts of gaming that we've all been curious about, right? The devs, the events, the larger sort of scope of things professionally with gaming that we all kind of want to be a part of, but we can't always be a part of as just like an individual player sitting behind our screen. So like, to me, content creators work as that bridge to bring our communities more into that space and bring perspective on that space to our communities. And with all of that said, when it particularly comes to MMOs, we have a social component because there is so much social stuff within MMOs, whether or not you super engage with it. I mean, like you were saying, you go to people's weddings, right? And it's amazing, whether it's a guild, an FC, whether it's just the surrounding community, it's a Twitter community, it's an art community, it's a whatever. We have these spaces, and it's all our responsibility together. And like, this is something that I've tried to create as a mindset on stream. When people say to me on stream, like, Rook, you've made a really positive space, I try to say, we make the positive space. I try to constantly turn that language around so that it's never one person's responsibility, it's everybody's responsibility. And if you set that tone in your content and then you reinforce it, right? So like, we do have rules on the Discord. We have rules for chat. We are an LGBTQIA plus inclusive space. We are a diverse space. We don't allow racist jokes. We don't allow these things that people might say offhandedly. And sometimes people get upset about that. Or, you contact them and you moderate. And my moderation team is a huge part of this whole effort. So like, I think that goes for a lot of content creators. But when it comes down to it, it's people supporting tone, language, respect, discussion, and then reinforcing that on all different levels, at the top down to the person who just came in and is like, oh, I'm getting this vibe, and we're going to be friendly, we're going to talk, we're going to ask questions from one another, we're going to respect one another. So it really is everybody's effort, but being the face of something, being a content creator, being a leader in a community, even being an FC lead, right? We think of it a lot of times as being important. I just made a tweet about this. It's so funny. When in reality, you're actually the person that has to be the most humble and serve others the most. And that's so important to keep in mind. Like, you should always be looking at how you can support other people in a space and keep an open mind before you do anything else. And before you know it, that all adds up, right? It's like somebody comes in that decides they want to be rude, or they want to toss callous things out, or they want to bring everybody down or critique everything, but they'll find that they have no footing in a community where the precedent is something more positive.
So where's the threshold? So we've got thresholds between like us and journalists, which is what Kopex is asking. We've got thresholds between large communities, something like Asmongold or Reddit, right? Where those are very different. One has a leader and one does not, and versus smaller communities where you've got somebody who's streaming to their first ever, one or two people they probably know in real life. Like where does that threshold, where's the responsibility? Because responsibility doesn't feel very gradient, because where we test responsibility is when something goes wrong. So when something goes wrong and there's 6 people in stream, it doesn't really blow up. When something goes wrong and there's 50,000 people, it does. So like where there isn't really tools in content creation, because we're all really just people behind cameras. We're not really, there is no training. You don't go to school for this. And so there is no license you get.
Yet.
Like best case, you get a Twitch check mark and you get monetized. And all that says is, we believe that you will not be so atrocious that we can't make money off of you. Like that's really what the threshold is saying. Like, and different platforms communicate that in different ways, and it gets more nuanced. But like, where is the threshold to where that responsibility, how do we grow into those shoes as content creators?
Oh man, we could do a whole other podcast just on this stuff.
I know this is the last question. We're just gonna end on this one.
I mean, it depends on the content creator, right? So this just encompasses so much, and I'm sure both of you, oh my gosh, have so many wonderful things to say about this too. But this question encompasses so many different things, right? If we're talking in more of a professional level, like game journalism, which you mentioned specifically, right? In game journalism, are we assuming that like we're talking about, accurately reporting and reviewing a game, looking at a greater scope of work, having played it, having this professional voice that's getting paid for having a critical opinion, right? All of those are things that go into game journalism specifically. Now, some content creators, that's what they do, right? Like if you are a reviewer, if you are somebody that's doing that kind of stuff, I think it is your responsibility to learn those things, because you are being a voice of authority. So you need to learn about what it means to actually break down a game, what your perspective is, how you hone it, the impact you have. All of that's really important. When it comes to like a broader kind of discussion about just being facilitators in the gaming space, like community builders and things like that, I think one of the most important things that you can do, because like you're saying, there is no school for this. There is nothing that teaches you. There's no guide that we get that's like how to do good community building and not be a dick on the internet. And you're like, oh, great. Wow. So nice. Love it. What's offensive today? I don't know. What isn't? Great. Like the thing is that like anything, you can constantly learn from everywhere and everyone. Like if you are ever in a space and you don't know for yourself, like what is appropriate, you can ask 5 other people what their thoughts are and make sure you're getting a diversity of voices. But like, this is even something we just do in moderation in my community. I have moderators from all different perspectives and walks of life. We bring together a panel if there's ever anything that I'm like, I don't know about this. How do we feel about this? And then people will give their thoughts and opinions. And then I will kind of look at that and I'll think about my own opinions, and then I'll move forward from that. But especially as content creators, we can't absolve ourselves of the ongoing responsibility to learn to better ourselves and to, I think, professionally interact in a space where, for better or worse, we will be amidst other professionals and players. We will be having an impact no matter how big or small you are. So learning how to carry yourself well, learning how to be sensitive to topics and get information where you yourself lack it, learning how to do these things and fostering conversations and understanding behind the scenes. That's crucial, because so many content creators get in their own heads, because when it comes down to it, a lot of us are a one-man show. We sit down in front of our computer, we do our thing, but we can't get to the point where we think that our own perspective is the end all be all of everything. So I think that just keeping an open mind is important.
I would think, and to add kind of my final thought on that, to kind of put a bow on it and on the show here, is that I also think don't be afraid to not be an expert and admit that you're not an expert in said situation and topic. I'm not an expert in X. And if asked about that, don't feel like you have to put on some kind of show or front like, oh yeah, I know all about X, Y, and Z. Just be like, I don't know about that. That applies whether we're talking about game systems, etc. Hey, Brian, what's your thought on X, Y, and Z within this game? I haven't really touched it. That's not kind of the content that I usually gravitate towards. If I get around to it, I'll try to give you guys an informed opinion, or at least setting the context of what experience I have, and not trying to pretend to be an authority on everything in that regards. And I think that just comes from like setting a level of humility and understanding, like, yeah, like there's no way as a dad, am I going to go be doing Ultimate right now? Maybe later in the future. I like Ultimate. I like watching Ultimate, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you. And I'm disappointed that there's no Ultimate for all the things that you listed, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, oh yeah, like I'm really distraught because that's content that I was planning on doing. No, that's inauthentic in that regards, but I hope that you really enjoyed that highlight, and I hope that you check out the full podcast. Again, link is in the description. Thanks for being here, and I hope you have a fantastic day, you wonderful, beautiful individual.